toast. Fiora's voice rang clearly now. To them, to Lucy, to Dax. Quinlan swiped a shaking hand across his brow. To all of us. They shuffled their feet, gathering around as if joining a solemn ritual. Glasses clinked, but the sound lacked a joyous spark. When Fiora spoke, her voice bore the soft timbre of reminiscence. I remember Lucy's laugh. It lit up the room. We need to keep her light alive, Quinlan murmured, his thoughts swirling with memories that begged him to release the burden they carried. One by one, the stories poured out, a flowing testament to lives once shared, some humorous, some heart-wrenching. Laughter spouted reluctantly at first, sparking into embers of joy, then roaring like a fire-catching wind. Remember that time Dax tried to ghost-bust a real ghost? Marissa roared, her laughter filling the cold space. They all erupted, and for that moment, weight lifted. As the shadows chased the light, Clara, a watcher in the corners, who never spoke but absorbed every nuance, finally whispered, I think they'd be proud. We're stronger together. Quinlan looked at Fiora, their eyes connecting amid the laughter. In that glance, fear stilled, longing surged, and shared resolve reset their course. Just before the laughter waned, Quinlan caught Fiora's eye, her joy reflecting in his own emptiness. Remember, we have to face it together, he said, uncertainty threading through his tone, but hope flickered in the air between them. The storm outside heaved, loud and furious, mirroring their warring emotions, love and loss intertwined, fated against a backdrop of desperation. They felt the entity lurking just beyond the walls, a reminder of the cost of their fragile existence. Scene 53, Emotional Clarity. The air was thick, the kind of oppressive silence that fogged the mind. Quinlan leaned against the crumbling stone wall, the jagged edges biting into his shoulder. Shadows danced in the flickering light of their dying lantern, casting distortions that seemed to lurch toward him as if trying to squeeze the breath from his lungs. His heart thudded heavily, the sound a dull roar in the silence following their recent chaos. He felt Fiora's presence before he saw her, an energy crackling in the space between them like the charge before a storm. She stepped into view, her fiery hair disheveled, tension radiating off her. The remnants of their group's laughter felt leagues away, replaced by a weighty uncertainty. Why didn't you say anything? Fiora's voice pierced the silence, dropped an unrelenting anchor into the storm churned within them. All those stories, and you never shared the hardest truth. Quinlan's brow furrowed, vulnerability flashing in his blue eyes. Fiora, no. Her hands flew up in exasperation. You think pretending everything's fine is going to hold us together? Sort of like those ghost stories? Intimidating, huh? Those stories were never just that, and you know it, Quinlan said, finally pushing himself off the wall. The walls of the old mansion seemed to shudder at his anger, the whispers of past tragedies curling around them. You think I wanted to dredge up the past? To drag you through that darkness? The air crackled between them, thick with their unspoken emotions. We share these wounds, Fiora replied, the tremor in her voice belying the strength in her words. She stepped closer, her expression softening. You don't have to protect me from your grief. I feel it too. He ached to reach for her, to close the space that felt unbearable yet so necessary. Yet, as he opened his mouth to respond, the memories swirled around them, a cacophony of laughter mingled with ghostly sobs. A dark silhouette seemed to loom in the corner of the room, its presence suffocating. The ghost they had awakened was far less forgiving than any soul from their nearly forgotten tales. I didn't lose her in vain, you know. I was supposed to save her. Quinlan's voice cracked, the burden of guilt spilling over into their fragile moment. He wished he could wash it all away, but nothing seemed to ease the sting of responsibility weighing down his heart. Fiora placed a hand on his arm. The heat of her touch felt like home, drawing him from the depths of his own despair. You loved her. It was never your fault if you didn't see it coming, she said softly, each word a thread weaving them back together. But I do understand now. We can carry our grief together. A beat of silence hung between them, laden with the truth neither could deny. He glanced at her, the flicker of shared understanding igniting a spark in her hazel eyes. But insecurity wrapped around her, too, the desire to be strong undermined by her own fears. Fiora, Quinlan exhaled heavily, but she stepped closer, shushing him with a finger pressed against his lips. Let's not talk. she said, her breath brushing against him, sweet and fragile. For just a moment, they stood on the precipice, vulnerability hanging in the air like the fading light. But their moment was shattered as shouts erupted down the hall, twisting their fragile intimacy back into chaos. The others were facing the entity again, its rage palpable, its purpose clear. Fiora pulled away, urgency pressing upon them like the crushing weight of stone. "Quinlan," a voice yelled from the distance. "Max," heart racing, panic palpable. "We need you. Now!" Fiora bit her lip, her eyes wide as the ghostly cries echoed hauntingly around them. "We can't do this alone. We have to focus." Quinlan nodded, determination setting in as he turned back toward the chaos. Each footfall felt heavier, laced with memories of loss and the desperate hope of reclaiming what lived in love's embrace. As they moved together, strengthening their bond amidst the storm, one thing became achingly clear. Their fight wasn't just for survival. It was forged from the flames of grief, hope, and a connection that shouldn't exist in shadows. Quinlan whispered, "Together." Fiora met his gaze, an unvoiced promise between them. It was the clarity they both craved, but time was slipping away. Scene 54. Facing the entity again. The night lay upon the remnants of Hollow Grove like a thick shroud, heavy and damp, as the wind whispered through the skeletal trees, sending shivers across the barren landscape. A silver moon peeked through the swirling clouds, casting ghostly patches of light that flickered on the ground like memories too painful to hold. Each gust tangled with the unease in the stomachs of Quinlan Vex and Fiora Lise as their friends gathered around, their faces reflecting a mix of determination and dread. Quinlan stood at the forefront, his usually playful demeanor replaced by a focused intensity. The faint glow of the lanterns barely illuminated his somber features. The shadows emphasized the weight he carried, his heart pounding with the urgency of their mission. Tonight, this was more than just survival. It was a reckoning. "All right, everyone," Quinlan said, his voice steady yet urgent. "We face the entity together. No one gets left behind." The resolve in his tone resonated throughout the circle of friends, a unifying mantra that pushed away insecurities. Fiora stood beside him, warmth radiating from her presence as she gripped his arm tightly, grounding him. "We've already lost so much. We need to find a way to communicate with it, maybe reason with it." Her words hung in the air, hope tangled with desperation. "Reason with it?" interjected Emery, creases framing his forehead as he rubbed his temples. "It's a vengeful spirit. What makes you think it wants anything other than to see us suffer?" A tense silence fell, until Celia, ever the skeptic, scoffed lightly. "Maybe it thrives on our fear. Either way, we have nothing left to lose." Her voice started to shake, but steadied under the weight of the impending fight. Behind them, Blake and Arya fiddled with the rudimentary protection charms they'd crafted, the faint rustle of twigs snapping beneath their nervous fingers. "If we're going to have a ghostly chat," Arya muttered, "we need to be prepared for it to not play nice." Her eyes met Blake's, an accidental spark igniting as he grinned reassuringly, the kind of look that held a million unspoken words. "Focus, people," Quinlan snapped, shifting his attention back to the looming threat. "We do this together, or we don't do it at all." The wind howled, carrying with it a sense of impending doom. As the group moved towards the abandoned cabin at the heart of the grove, its wooden structure moaned under the weight of centuries. Translucent fog curled around their ankles, each step dripping with anxiety. "Remember the stories?" Emery said suddenly, breaking the sobering silence as he reminisced about the nights spent sharing tales around campfires. Some laughed about the shallow scares, while others recounted genuine horror. "We can share our fears out loud to draw it out, show it that we're not afraid." Fiora glanced at Quinlan, her heart swelling with admiration. "We can do this, together, just like when we lit up the dark." Her hand found his again, this time pressing gently against the warmth of his palm. Quinlan turned to her, a fleeting smile dancing on the edges of his lips in the bleak night. "One last adventure, huh?" "Let's make it count," she responded, the desire in her eyes reflecting the moonlight, a silent understanding forming between them, fingers laced tightly together, a promise neither dared to break. As they stepped inside, the air thickened, saturated with the scent of mildew and decay. A rustling sound broke the quiet, snapping them back to reality. The shadows shifted unnaturally, swirling as if alive with anticipation. Suddenly, the darkness pooled into a human-like figure across the room, its eyes a void under the dim glow. Their breath hitched as every struggle of every person in the cabin threatened to spill over in terror. "Here goes nothing," Quinlan whispered, squaring his shoulders as he took a bold step forward. "We're here to listen." Before the entity could respond, Fiora instinctively stepped up beside him, their shoulders brushing together. The warmth of her presence ignited something within him. Their fingers intertwined tighter, and a gasp slipped from her lips as he leaned in closer, the space between them charged with a tension far from just fear. "I'm sorry," he said softly, taking her visage in, those glistening eyes, the curl of her hair, illuminated like strands of gold, flecked with starlight. Their lips met in a feverish kiss, a desperate fusion of the lives they fought to save, an unspoken vow to confront the horror ahead together. Time slowed, the haunting shadows forgotten, drowned beneath the currents of raw emotion until the chill in the air returned, and they broke apart as urgent voices called their names. "Quinlan? Fiora, look." Celia's voice rang out, dragging them back to the fight ahead as the figure began to stir. A surge of recognition filtered through the air. Every horror they faced loomed, but it was now unmistakably clear. They'd have to confront it with the depth of their feelings, their laughter, and their bonds. But first, they had to survive the darkness rushing toward them like a wave. Scene 55. The last ritual begins. The air felt thick, almost suffocating, as the flickering candlelight danced wildly against the damp stone walls of the forgotten cellar. Shadows twisted and choked the corners, whispering secrets that sent chills darting down the spines of the survivors, each pulse of light a flicker of hope intertwined with terror. Quinlan Vex stood at the center of the room, his jaw clenched tight. He resisted the urge to wipe the sweat from his brow, the weight of his friends' lives pressing heavily on him. "We can't keep ignoring the truth. We need to confront it head on," Fiorla's urged, her voice a mixture of determination and desperation. She leaned slightly forward, showing the vibrant energy that had often pulled the group through dark patches. Yet her eyes reflected a vulnerability he hadn't seen in a long time, a flicker of uncertainty that gnawed at him. "To confront it, we need to know its past," said Laura, her arms crossed defensively. She was perched on a jagged stone, the atmosphere around her long ago transformed from one of camaraderie to suspicion. What if it was an innocent soul trapped like we are? What then? Or what if it's a monster? Daniel interjected, pacing the room, each footfall echoing louder as tension simmered. "Stop romanticizing it. We're in its territory. It's not going to just let us talk it out over coffee." "Enough," Quinlan snapped, the desperation twisting his words. "We have to try. We owe it to those we've lost," he added, his voice softening as he glanced at Fiora. The ghost of a shared concern lingered between them, tangled with the weight of unspoken words. "A bunch of us are dead because of your need to play hero," Laura shot back, her voice raised, echoing the sentiment that had lurked in the shadows, festering since their return from that fateful hunt. Fiora's reaction drew an involuntary gasp from her lips. "Laura, you don't know what he—" "No, I do. I was there. And now we're all suffering because of it. Why should we have faith in a plan that's already failed?" The room grew heavy with silence. Quinlan's gaze hardened like iron, but Fiora's eyes softened, brimming with understanding. "What if we channel that anger into something productive? We need to bind it, understand it," she said quietly, reaching out to rest her hand on Quinlan's forearm, fingers brushing like feathers, igniting the friction between them. "But how do we bind the unbindable?" Cheeky Kevin asked, his usual grin replaced by a serious disposition. The weight of the crisis had wrapped around him like a shroud. "Do we really think we can manipulate something ancient, something that may have never wanted us here? Someone's got to know how to approach it. There must be a way." Fiora pressed, her hand lingering on Quinlan's forearm, stirring a warmth that hinted at something deeper beneath the turmoil. Their eyes met, the space between them alight with unneeded, unuttered feelings. For a moment, the chaos receded, leaving only the raw, undeniable connection, a promise of trust unbroken even amidst betrayal. "Then let's dig," Quinlan finally said, his resolve solidifying in the gentle caress of Fiora's hand. "If we have to awaken its tragedies, we do it together." Across the room, Amelia's knees trembled beneath her as she shuffled toward a dusty book. Then it's time we research this entity, she began, her tone somber. Her eyes, normally full of laughter, now glimmered with fear. Find threads, connections, some story that can help us. What if we find a past that wants us dead too? Daniel's sarcasm cut through the tension like a knife. Then we fight back, Laura said, her voice steadying, though the flicker of tension was still palpable. I'm tired of this thing controlling any part of us. As they gathered closer around Amelia, the world narrowed down to the ancient book, its pages crumbling. The air felt charged, thundering with unvoiced fears and fresh determination. With each shared glance charged with unannounced emotions, they stepped into a ritual that could either bind them together or doom them utterly. Together we'll face it, Quinlan declared, locking eyes with Fiora. We have to believe. We have to. Before he could finish, a sudden crash sounded from behind the door, followed by a wail that sent all their hearts racing. They shared a collective glance, horror dawning in realization. Understand its pain. Fiora finished softly, trembling slightly. A chill spiraled through the room, amplifying the flickering candlelight as the reality of their peril pressed in closer, constricting like a noose. They all stepped closer together, for better or worse, their destinies entwined one last time. Scene 56, Unmasking the Truth. The damp air of the abandoned chapel hung thick with anticipation, and the flickering light of the dwindling candles cast elongated shadows that danced erratically on the cracked stone walls. Quinlan leaned against a cold, damp pillar, his mind racing as he surveyed the once sacred space that now felt like a mausoleum. The musty smell of old parchment mixed with the earthy scent of wet soil filtered through the air, almost suffocating him with its weight. He turned slightly, catching Fiora's eye across the room. Fiora stood by the altar, her fingers tracing the jagged carvings that marred its surface. The flicker of light revealed the worry lines etched across her forehead, though she tried to mask them with a brave smile. "Do you think it really wants to hurt us?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, tinged with vulnerability. Quinlan shook his head. I don't know, but it's angry. We need to understand why." He took a step toward her, his heart heavy with the gravity of their predicament, feeling the pull of their past. Before they continue, a sharp cough erupted from the back, bringing them both back to the present. Ellen, who had been sitting on a fallen stone, rose abruptly, her usually bright face now shadowed with concern. "What if it's not about us? What if it's about something that happened long before we got here?" "Like what?" Jonah interjected, his brow furrowing as he shifted restlessly, the leather of his jacket creaking under the movement. His tone suggested skepticism, but his eyes glimmered with curiosity. "Like the stories," Fiora replied, stepping closer to the group. "The ones we told last night, the ones that brought us here." The silence that followed was filled with unspoken fears, each person grappling with the weight of their own tales. "I think it's tied to one of us," Ellen whispered, glancing nervously at Quinlan. Maybe it's one of our fears manifesting. Or our regrets," Quinlan muttered, staring into the flickering candlelight as if it held the answers. He thought of his friend, lost in a fire long ago, a name that echoed in his heart like a ghost itself. Fiora stepped closer, brushing her shoulder against Quinlan's. "What if we shared? Just like last night, maybe it will help us understand the entity and each other." Her voice was soft yet resolute, drawing a deep breath from Quinlan as warmth pulsed between them. "I don't know," he said, his voice faltering as he looked down, reminding himself of the pain he carried. "What if sharing just opens more wounds? What if it gets worse?" Ellen softened, her eyes swimming with empathy. "Quinlan, keeping it all in just festers. It's like a wound that won't heal. Maybe letting it out could be freeing." They sat down, forming a circle around the dim light, the shadows of the chapel hugging them like protective sentinels. One by one, they began to share, weaving tales of forgotten loves, hidden griefs, and silent fears, their voices rippling through the darkness as more and more of their truths spilled out. "I still see her face," Quinlan finally broke in. "All the time. She was a ghost-hunting buddy, and I thought I could save her. I didn't." His voice trembled, and Fiora instinctively reached for his hand, squeezing it gently as he continued. "I thought if I was just faster or more prepared, she'd be here. Quinlan, you can't blame yourself for that. Ellen interjected quickly, her eyes widening. You were just teenagers. But I led the group. I didn't listen to the signs, the shadows. I thought we could chase the thrill. Now there's this thing hunting us down at every turn. It's like a joke or a punishment. But what if it wasn't? Fiora whispered, their eyes locked, the air heavy with the weight of their shared pain. Behind them, Jonah murmured, maybe that pain is connected to the spirit, like a thread binding us together. The realization hung in the air, thick and trembling, as they absorbed the implications. Perhaps it's the fear of our past that brought us here, Fiora suggested, her hand slipping from Quinlan's as she addressed the group. What if we bear these burdens together? To face it? The ghost wants something from us. Maybe it needs understanding, just like we do. Quinlan felt a surge of hope mixed with vulnerability. Could confronting their deepest fears bind them together? The shadows of the chapel were closing in, yet in that moment a flicker of light ignited within him. Perhaps this confrontation, terrible as it might be, was not just survival. It was a connection, an unearthing of truths they had buried deep down ghosts that demanded to be acknowledged. Let's do it together then, he said, voice stronger now. Whatever comes next, we face it as one. Silence wrapped around them, echoing the quiet resolve shared between friends. Somewhere in the depths of the darkness, a hint of laughter lingered. Or maybe it was just the remnants of their fears intertwining with the shadows of their stories yet to be told. Scene 57. The final stand. Amidst the dim flickering of dying lanterns, Quinlan stood at the threshold of despair, breath coming in shallow gulps. The biting cold wrapped around him like a damp shroud, pressing against his ribs. He could feel the residual tension in the air, the weight of their anticipation, and it churned his stomach. He glanced over at Fiora, her vibrant energy dimmed by the shadows that danced on the walls. Their eyes met, a silent acknowledgement passing between them, charged with unspoken fears and lingering affections. Quinlan, we have to do this now, she urged, her voice steady but soft, like the tender brush of fingertips against skin. We can't let it win. The plea in her eyes held him captive, igniting warmth that contradicted the chilling darkness around them. Quinlan swallowed hard, summoning a flicker of his playful spirit. Right, because nothing says good time like a face-off with an ancient entity hell-bent on our destruction, he quipped, a thin smile breaking through his facade. But hey, at least it'll make a good ghost story for the ages, huh? Fiora smiled faintly, yet it was tinged with something heavier. She stepped closer, hesitating just enough for him to sense her vulnerability bleeding through. What if it doesn't end like we want, Quinlan? What if? Before she could finish, a loud crash echoed through the hollow space, sending a shiver up their spines. The entity was drawing near, a malevolent force that thrummed through the very foundation beneath them. Behind them, the rest of their friends were gathering, each bringing pieces of themselves, fear, anxiety, but also determination. Over to the left, Mia and Marcus collaborated over a hastily drawn protection symbol, their fingers tangling unintentionally as they worked together. Mia was trembling, but the spark of fierce bravery in her hazel eyes belied her fear. If we don't stop this now, she said fiercely, we'll never have another chance. Marcus nodded, glancing over at her with admiration. And I refuse to let that happen, not after everything we've been through. That unyielding camaraderie hung in the air, centering them in light even as chaos swirled around. As Quinlan prepared for the confrontation, Fiora discreetly stepped over, her heart pounding. Quinlan, if something happens, you must promise me you'll keep fighting. She grasped his arm, her touch electric, pulling him into a moment of clarity that cut through their mounting dread. Of course, I'll always fight for you, he promised, his heart racing. A leap of faith echoed in their shared breath. He could sense the gravity behind her gaze, the uncertainty lurking just beneath the surface. The moment felt intimate, almost as if they were cocooned in a world all their own, hushed amidst the growing storm. With a sudden crash, the air around them thickened, shadows converging into a dark whirlpool. Fiora shivered and instinctively took a step back, forcing Quinlan to follow. Without thinking, he closed the distance, pulling her firmly against him. The warmth of their bodies ignited a flicker of resolve. Together, right? He murmured, their foreheads nearly touching. Fiora nodded, vulnerability in her eyes morphing into fierce determination. Together, he leaned in just enough to brush his lips against her forehead, a fleeting yet fervent promise hanging between them. But as he drew back, unable to quell the flood of emotions, he found himself caught in her gaze. Time stretched, and they both knew what lay behind them: the dark entity, the chaos, their friends united in the fight, but also their own distinct fears and dreams. A shadowy figure emerged from the dark, looming and dreadful. The air grew cold, and its menacing presence crashed over them like a tidal wave. "Now!" Quinlan shouted, momentum snapping them back. "Let's show this thing what we're made of." A chorus of voices sprang to life, rallying together as they unleashed their pent-up bravery, each stepping forward with a newfound purpose. The weight of their fears now transformed into a collective momentum. They would not go down without a fight. As they engaged, the air crackling with energy and determination, Quinlan felt a tether in his heart, not just to Fiora, but to every single person in that room. "Together," he bellowed again, and the word resonated with a frightening, exhilarating promise. The ultimate stand against the dark awaited them, but the bonds forged and battles faced, that was the life worth fighting for. Scene 58, the climax of fear. Beneath the pallid glow of moonlight filtering through dense branches, the atmosphere pulsed with a silence that draped over the group like a heavy fog. Quinlan Vex, kneeling at the edge of the woods, fumbled nervously with the tattered, blackened leather binding of the journal they had found, long neglected and steeped in the chilling tales of their ancestors. The air crackled, ripe with tension, as the oppressive forest loomed behind them like a monstrous presence. "Do you really think this will work?" Fiora Lise asked, her voice trembling slightly, tension charging the air. She wrung her hands, illuminating her freckled face with the soft glow of her phone screen. A constellation of thoughts danced in her hazel eyes, revealing more than she dared to voice. Quinlan glanced at her, feeling the weight of unspoken fears. "It has to," he replied, unwavering. "If we don't try, we'll never know what this thing really wants." Margot, standing slightly behind them, leaned in, her soft features illuminated in the darkness. "And what if it wants to tear us apart every chance it gets?" "We could end this." James, practically bouncing on his heels, broke in, his enthusiasm clashing dramatically with the eerie ambience. "We just need to chant the protection spell." "Right," Fiora interjected. She waved her hand dismissively, though she bit her lip, her mind racing. "But what if it works too well? What if we accidentally summon something worse?" "Worrying about that won't get us anywhere," said Aisha, a hint of exasperation edging her words. She brushed her black hair behind her ear, scanning the darkness for any hint of movement. "We've got to stick together, no matter what." As a cool draft whispered through the trees, the unnerving stillness was broken by an otherworldly rustle in the underbrush, setting everyone's heart racing. Quinlan felt his grip tighten on the journal. Okay, just let's move," he said, urgency lacing his tone as he glanced at Fiora. Her brows knotted in concentration, drawing closer to him. They were bound together, not merely by the presence of danger, but by the lingering, unsaid desire that simmered between them. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed from the depths of the forest, drawing all their gazes toward the shadows. "What was that?" whispered Margot. Then a laugh, a sinister, sharp sound disrupted their gathering, sending cold shivers down each spine. The laughter cracked through the air like a bolt of lightning, touching each of them with a frigid dread. Quinlan's eyes widened. "It's too late," he murmured, feeling the ground shift beneath their feet. "Focus," Aisha snapped, her challenging gaze cutting through the encroaching terror. "We need to keep our heads clear. Fiora, read the spell." Despite her inner chaos, Fiora rallied herself, gripping the journal with both hands, her voice strong, yet betraying a tremor. "In the name of those who went before us, we call upon your power to guard and protect us." The words hung in the air like a noose, binding them together in their desperate plea. But with each syllable, a low growl resonated from the shadows, creeping closer with a malignancy that clawed at their nerves. "Louder," shouted James, his voice cracking slightly. The infernal laughter erupted again, almost mocking their attempts. "I think it's laughing at us," Margot squeaked, her eyes wide. "Breathe, just breathe," Quinlan murmured, drawing Fiora's focus back to him. "We got this. Together, We have to do this together, Fiora urged, locking her gaze with his. The connection sparked between them like phosphorescence, flickering before the encroaching darkness. It was a tempest of desperation and hope, an unspoken vow they shared at that moment, even as danger nudged ever closer. Together, the others chorused, their voices a fragile lifeline in the burgeoning fear. Suddenly, something massive swept past them. Sacrilegious shadows twisted through the layout of trees, leaving chaos in their wake. The air rippled thick with malice, and Quinlan realized they had little time. Keep reading, he urged, hand pressed to Fiora's shoulder, warmth battling the chill creeping over them. You have to keep going. Fiora swallowed the lump in her throat, but the moment was gone. Before her heart could catch its breath, a scream shattered the night. No! As they turned, the void swallowed their cries, plunging them into heart-stopping chaos. An entity, more ancient than time, lunged from the shadows, its primal force wrapping around them like a vice, each heartbeat a step toward annihilation. Quinlan clutched Fiora tighter, the taste of fear mingling with courage on the precipice of uncertainty. We have to fight, he shouted, as the darkness lunged for them again. But Fiora's eyes, wide with terror, reflected both the urgency of their plea and the unyielding question. Could love stand against such a foe? Scene 59, Unleashing Fury. The wind howled like a wounded creature, rustling the leaves in urgent whispers as the atmosphere thickened with an electric tension. Fiora stood at the center of the abandoned clearing, encircled by her friends, their faces illuminated by the flickering light of smoldering embers. Each pulse of energy within her ignited old memories and a fierce determination rising like a tide. Quinlan, his brow furrowed, shifted closer to her, desperation edging into his voice. Fiora, we can't wait any longer. If we don't act now... Shh, she interrupted, her eyes darting to the underbrush, listening for the shadows that writhed around them. She could feel the entity's presence creeping closer, a tangible weight on her chest. I need to concentrate. Fiora took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling rhythmically, grounding herself in the moment. The earth beneath her feet felt alive, connecting her to something larger than herself. She closed her eyes briefly, envisioning the streams of energy swirling around her, vibrant and inviting. The air tingled against her skin like summer rain, awakening something deep within her, an instinct, raw and primal. Just then, Cassie screamed, "It's here!" A silhouette surged from the darkness, a shifting mass of rage and despair. It moved like thunderclouds swirling before a storm, and panic gripped the group like a vice. Amidst the chaos, Fiora felt a spark igniting within her. She opened her eyes, and in that moment, everything clicked. "No!" she shouted, her voice fierce and unyielding. "Not today." Before she realized what she was doing, energy coalesced at her fingertips. White light flickered like bursts of fireflies, illuminating her friends' faces, wonder tinged with fear. She could see them now. Quinlan's earnest determination, Cassie's wide eyes reflecting hope, Zane's protective stance, ready to shield them from the relentless darkness swelling before them. They believed in her. "Stand with me," Fiora commanded, her heart pounding in both fear and exhilaration. She extended her arms, inviting her friends to join her. With hesitant resolve, they stepped closer, forming a circle. Each hand pressed against another, a testament that they were stronger together. "Think of your love, your joy," Fiora urged. "Channel it." Jasper, hesitating for a mere heartbeat, finally let go. "Fine. I'm thinking of not being torn to pieces." His voice trembled with sarcasm, but Fiora could see the glimmer of determination in his eyes. Around her, emotions surged, a blend of courage and shared memories washing over them. They whispered stories into the night, recalling times of laughter, trust, their very essence interwoven in this harrowing moment. "Remember the campfire tales?" Cassie recalled, her grip tightening on Zane's hand. "The ones that scared us silly? Those reminded us we were alive." "Yes!" Fiora shouted, focusing on the energy thrumming at her fingertips, pulling from their collective experiences. "Live, feel, remember." The shimmering glow brightened, wrapping around the group like a protective cocoon. "It's working," Quinlan exclaimed, his voice both thunderous and tender. "Keep going." Fiora met his gaze, and for a fleeting second, the chaos faded away. His dark eyes locked onto hers, holding a weight of emotion that warmed her despite the icy fear that lingered. She could see the determination reflected back in his gaze, but there was something more, a connection that pulsed between them like a heartbeat. As the shadows writhed closer, Fiora leaned into Quinlan, their foreheads nearly touching. "You make me brave," she whispered, breathless. "Then let's be brave together," he murmured, the subtle tension crackling in the air around them as they dared to lean closer, their lips almost brushing. But a guttural growl erupted from the depths of the forest, shattering the moment. The entity lunged at them, a tornado of darkness and fury. Fear gripped Fiora, but she couldn't lose her focus. "Now!" she shouted. "Protect our circle." Channeling every ounce of energy, she unleashed a wave of light, colliding with the abyss. The friction of power vibrated through her, igniting an overwhelming force that resonated with love, fear, and laughter, the essence of their fragile existence. Sound, light, and shadow collided in a magnificent roar. The darkness recoiled, but in that same heartbeat, Fiora felt it surge back, relentless and hungry. "Keep holding on," Zane shouted, adrenaline anchoring his voice. They were locked, not just in a fight for survival, but in a dance of desperation and unity. The world around them blurred, thunderous claps echoing, as they stood tall, unwavering, refusing to yield. The flickering light was their only defense against the eclipse closing in around them. Even amidst the chaos, a singular thought, anchored Fiora love, once ignited takes flight against any despair. Scene 60. The breaking point. Quinlan leaned against the rough wooden railing of the dilapidated porch, the storm brewing overhead, a stark parallel to the chaos inside him. The wind howled, carrying the scent of rain and something unsettling, a musk that prickled at his skin like the fingers of ghosts yearning for release. He stared vacantly at the flickering shadows cast by the lone lantern swinging gently on its chain, illuminating the taut faces of his friends gathered indoors. "Aiden," Quinlan muttered, his jaw clenched tight. "Can you just focus for a second? This isn't a game." Aiden, leaning close to Fiora, appeared more interested in fixing her hair behind her ear than in the rising tension. With a flick of his wrist, he brushed away the wisps, the intimacy of the gesture stirring something more than just fury in Quinlan's chest. "Yeah, well, maybe if someone hadn't decided to poke a sleeping bear, we wouldn't be stuck in this nightmare." Aiden shot back, arms crossed, his stance wide as if challenging Quinlan to step closer. "Maybe if you cared more about the team than your ego, we'd have a plan instead of standing here arguing." Quinlan's voice cut through the silence, wavering between anger and a desperate plea for unity. Fiora, seated cross-legged on the dusty floor with Kaya and Marcus, looked up. "Guys, can we not do this now? We have Her voice faltered, the weight of their reality hanging over them like the dark clouds swirling outside. Quinlan caught her eye, desperation flickering as the door creaked behind them. "I'm just trying to protect you, all of you," he exclaimed, his voice a raw whisper beneath the rising wind. "By berating everyone? Not exactly the best strategy, Quinlan," Aiden replied, his eyes darting from Quinlan to Fiora, silent tales of jealousy delivering sharp jabs as he added, "You think you're the only one invested here?" "It's not just about you and me, Aiden," Quinlan said, struggling to maintain his composure. The memories of the last ghost hunting trip surfaced, a twisted blend of laughter and loss, but he pushed it down like he had so many times before, unwilling to let his anguish seep into the moment. Fiora stood suddenly, her laughter from moments ago eclipsed by a rising tide of frustration choking her. "You both are acting like children," she proclaimed, stepping between them, her voice firm. "We need to focus. The entity is out there, and it's only getting stronger." Kaya shifted uneasily, her blue eyes widening. "Do we really think a fight among ourselves is going to help?" she asked, her fingers tapping against her knee. "Help? That's what you think? I'm trying to keep everyone alive," Quinlan snapped, the heat of the moment radiating through him. "By pushing us away?" Fiora exclaimed, her voice cracking. For a heartbeat, silence enveloped them, the weight of their shared dread permeating the air. Quinlan's breath fell shallow, tension wrapped around them like barbed wire. "You want to protect us? Stop acting like a lone wolf." Aiden's voice cracked, raw and vulnerable, revealing the cracks in his bravado. Quinlan took a step back, the argument now a twisted dance of resentment and truth. His spine tingled with shame, the warmth of Aiden's feelings swirling around him like an unwelcome fog. Yet beneath the surface, there was a hum of unresolved camaraderie, the kind that explodes or ignites not without consequence. Maybe it's time I was honest, Quinlan began, the urgency building in his chest. I feared losing you all, but especially you, Fiora. He took a deep breath as glances darted between him and Aiden, anticipation threading through the group. What are you saying? Fiora's voice was laced with a vulnerability that pulled at his heart. I thought I could shield you from all this. He gestured around, the room filled with specters of words unspoken and fears unearthed. I didn't want to lose anyone again. Fiora stepped closer, a flicker of understanding sparking in her gaze as she searched for something deeper amid their turmoil. You don't have to carry that weight alone. As Aiden's eyes drilled into Quinlan, a spark of jealousy mingled with something more confusing, possibly concern, gripped the air. Look, we may not be able to fight this thing alone, Aiden interjected, his voice softer now, the bravado peeling away like old paint. But fighting each other won't save us. Can we find a way to work together? The tension began to dissipate into the weighty air, lingering like the storm clouds overhead. Quinlan nodded slowly, the shared burden of survival drawing them closer instead of tearing them apart. Then let's figure this out, together. As Quinlan felt the alliance shift, a singular thought flickered between them. The only way out of the dark was for them to step into the light together. Scene 61, Heartfelt Confessions. The flickering shadows danced ominously along the crumbling walls of the abandoned cabin as fiery sparks erupted from the faulty generator. Quinlan Vex crouched beside it, jiggling wires with exasperation, hoping to summon even the tiniest glimmer of light. The air was thick with tension. The ghosts of their past antics hung heavy, mingling with the smell of damp wood and old memories. Hey, genius, you sure this thing isn't more haunted than we are? Fiora Lise joked, her laughter almost melodic despite the mounting dread that loomed outside. She paced like a caged spirit, brushing her fingers over the peeling wallpaper, remnants of laughter and life. Very funny, Quinlan shot back, rolling his eyes but failing to suppress a barely there smile. I can hear the ghosts laughing too. Just then, a crash sounded from outside, sending a jolt of fear through their group. It was Jacoby, bounding toward them, eyes wide with panic. We've got to get to the window. The thing is hunting us. Jacoby's voice was frantic, breaking the light-hearted moment like glass shattering on concrete. Fiora's heart raced. As she turned to Quinlan, the urgency of the moment illuminated their vulnerabilities. She stepped closer, her breath catching in her throat. Quinn. Before she could finish, the cabin groaned, and the air turned frigid. Quinlan met her gaze, the playfulness replaced by determination. Stay close to me. But with every casual brush of Quinlan's arm, how could she ignore the weight of unspoken words? Fiora's thoughts churned amid the chaos. Let's go, she urged, but her eyes bore into his, searching for something more than survival. Quinn, there's something I need to say. Now's not the time, he snapped, frustration flaring beneath the surface, but the vulnerability in his tone softened her resolve. The firestorm of emotion fueled a fresh wave of honesty. No, it is, Fiora pressed, her voice lower yet more intense. We might not have tomorrow. Quinlan stepped back slightly, the flickering light of their surroundings ghosting across his features. Fiora. I know we've been through hell, she interrupted, her heart pounding in her chest, but I can't keep pretending. When we're together, I feel alive. It's always been you. The air thickened with tension, and time itself seemed to pause. The chaos outside faded to a distant echo as Quinlan searched her eyes. But what if? No, she whispered, taking a step forward, her voice unwavering. You have to listen. I don't want to lose you. Not again. The shadows morphed. A strange, fleeting quiet settled around them. Quinlan, heart pounding, fought to maintain his composure. You think we'll just waltz back to a normal life after this? You think it'll be easy? It won't be easy, Fiora exclaimed, tears prickling at the edges of her eyes. But that doesn't mean I want to let you go. It's not about ease. It's about fighting for what matters. For us. Quinlan swallowed hard, a myriad of emotions flashing across his face. From light-hearted moments spent laughing over campfire stories to the weight of loss and guilt that wrapped around him like a shroud, he struggled to ground himself amidst this revelation. Fiora. Her name escaped his lips like a hushed prayer, And in that moment, he finally grasped the depths of her feelings, the truth buried beneath years of laughter and unaddressed fears. Then, almost unexpectedly, the world around them shattered as the entity howled, fierce and unrelenting. The pressing darkness seemed to close in, flickering shadows intertwining with ferocious energy. And within the grasp of chaos, against everything pulling them apart, Quinlan stepped closer, offering the sanctuary they both needed. "Then let's not wait," he murmured, urgency pushing them forward. In one heartbeat, they surged together, lips colliding like a storm, meeting the sea messy, desperate, but undeniably real. Time suspended as they drank from one another's warmth, fears melting away in this fragile embrace, leaving only the promise of fighting together, not merely for survival, but for the chance to be more than they'd ever imagined. As their kiss lingered, a vow forged in desperation, the sinister wail of the entity pierced the air, breaking the spell. Fiora pulled back, breathless, their foreheads touching, hearts racing in sync. "We need to face it," Quinlan whispered, determination lacing his voice. "Together." Outside, the night deepened, a turbulent battlefield stirring with anger and shadows, and they took each other's hands tightly, ready to dive into the storm ahead. Scene 62, Inciting a Reckoning. The air inside the old cabin was thick with the scent of mildew, mixed with the faint odor of wood smoke. Quinlan leaned against the splintered wooden railing of the porch, tapping his fingers rhythmically against the weathered wood, creating an anxious symphony that intertwined with the rustling leaves and distant bird calls. He watched Fiora as she gathered their scattered supplies, her movements deliberate yet tinged with an undercurrent of urgency. Her brown hair fell in a messy cascade into her eyes, which sparkled with determination. "Can you believe we're actually doing this?" Fiora said, her voice a blend of excitement and fear. She paused to lock eyes with him, a question hanging in the air as heavy as the June humidity. Underneath the bravado, there lay unspoken fears, the past gnawing at her like an unseen specter. Quinlan nudged his jaw with a clenched fist, fighting the swell of emotions that threatened to breach the surface. "We have to face it. We can't just let it consume us." He cast a glance at their friends, gathered a few paces away, silently gearing up for whatever awaited them in the shadows. Meanwhile, Riley, one of their closest friends, rummaged through a backpack, his brow furrowed in concentration. Having been obsessed with folklore since childhood, he pulled out a dusty book entitled Legends of the Damned. "What if we find something here that can help us? There has to be a way to communicate with it." His voice grew increasingly animated as he flipped through the pages, the spine cracking under the strain. "It might not want to talk," laughed Tara, another friend, her hands crossed defiantly over her chest. "I can imagine it saying, 'Sorry, I don't do peace talks.'" She tapped her foot, nerves creeping into her otherwise jovial demeanor. Riley shot her a quick glare before retorting, "Great, Tara. That really boosts morale." His sarcasm hung like smoke between them, both lightening the tension and thickening it, nostalgia swirling amidst their shared pasts laced with ghost stories that now felt dangerously real. Quinlan's gaze returned to Fiora, whose expression shifted from resolve to uncertainty. He felt a tug at his heart, the weight of their shared history pressing down, squeezing the laughter out of their carefree days. "Fiora, if something goes wrong," he started, hesitating, "you know I'd—" "You'll what, Quinn?" she interrupted, her voice laced with frustration but softened by concern. "You can't always protect me. I'm not your responsibility, you know?" He stepped closer, overtaken by a wave of passion that bordered on desperation. "But you are family. I can't just stand by. What happened to Jane that haunts me? I can't lose anyone else." His voice dropped, revealing a vulnerability that felt raw in the stifling air. "I know," she whispered, emotion swelling in her gaze as she bit her lip to hold back a fragile smile. "But if we're going to do this, we need to trust each other. Not just you trying to save me, but all of us together. It's about being strong." There was a moment suspended in time, their past intertwined with their present, an electric crackle peppering the air around them. In a breath that felt like collective release, Quinlan reached for her hand. For a fleeting instant, they were just Quinn and Fiora, devoid of ghosts and darkness and hesitation. "Fiora." His voice was almost a plea, the weight of years wrapped around each syllable, drawing them closer. In that drawn-out moment, filled with the tension of what could be, she leaned in, heart racing, and with a hesitant brush of their lips, they found solace in the storm. The kiss was tentative, yet deeply felt, speaking volumes about their fears and hopes in a world smothered by the shadows of an ancient being. It was a powerful fusion of longing and resolve, as if anchoring each other amid chaos. But reality crashed in like thunder. They pulled apart with breaths mingling, only to be jolted back to the gravity of their situation. A chill swept through the trees, a souring of the atmosphere as a distant, bone-chilling shriek echoed into the clearing. Okay, that sounded way too much like doom for my taste, Tara joked, but there was no mirth in her eyes. Riley's expression hardened. We need to focus. It's now or never. Quinlan nodded, desire replaced by determination. Let's move together. As he turned to lead the way, he felt Fiora's fingers intertwine with his, a stark defiance against the looming darkness. There was no turning back, only the promise of their bond, heartfelt, powerful, and incandescent against the gathering storm. Scene 63. The Power of Love. In the dim, flickering light of the old lantern, shadows danced upon the walls of the abandoned lodge, creating a haunting backdrop for what was supposed to be a cozy evening. The air was thick with a musty odor, a lingering remnant of wood and dust that seemed to cling to every corner.